Hi everyone, Leanne here from Jaded Blossom, and I have two fun fall cards to share with you today. Hey, so I'm using Jaded Blossoms Build-A-Booth fall add-ons. They're Gnome Dies hair add-ons, they're Girl Gnome Dies, they're Mini Gnome Dies, they're Gnome Dies weather add-ons, they're Sky's the Limit stamp set with the matching outline dies. They're rainbow dies, they're fall dies, and they're hot air balloon dies. So I put these together on the Build-A-Booth fall add-ons assembly video, so you can check that out, but I'll be using that. So starting off, I'm making an A2 size card, cut at 8.5 by 5.5, scored at 4.25 inches. And then I added pattern paper from Doodlebug's Flea Market to the front, cut at the same size of an A2 size card base. Then I'm using Pumpkin Spice, the 6-inch pad, to to add a strip of the border patterns on the inside. So I just sort of cut along one of the borders. Next, I'm using a Harvest Sign stamp set from Jaded Blossom, and I'm going to stamp a sentiment using my Misty and some Barely Art glue. Got my little Misty corner there to line it up. Works well if the stamp is flat, right? And there we are. Happy Thanksgiving. So that's going to be on the inside. There. And I'm going to do the same to this one. You'll notice that I'm kind of making two cards somewhat at the same time. So this one also has some pattern paper along the bottom and the same sentiment added. You'll notice that I got some ink on that one, but we'll fix that up in a moment. Okay, so I am adding on, so this is going to be the border that I'm adding on to the second interior of the card. So it's just a fun fall border. I love Doodlebug papers, and like I said, Flea Market 6-inch, Pumpkin Spice 6-inch and 12-inch. There we are. And I also used the 12-inch Flea Market for the cloud paper on one of them. So now I'm adding Pumpkin Spice odds and ends from Doodlebug. This one is a little cloud blowing the leaves, which I think is appropriate, right, for fall. And I just think it's so cute, right? Using my Teflon bone folder to refold that card. Now I'm going to add on, this is my pattern paper from Doodlebug's Flea Market, the 12-inch paper line. And it just has like this all over cloud pattern. And I'm using ATG tape, and it's cut the same size as my card front. Well, actually, you know what? I think this was the 6-inch paper line. I'm sorry, the 6-inch Flea Market. There we are. Now on this one, I'm going to add some leaves. The neat thing about Doodlebug's odds and ends, is that they have all these different images you can use. So I'm going to use these leaves to cover up my little ink smudges. You see, you can always fix a boo-boo. No one will know what's there but me and you, right? You don't want to start over. If I did, my God, I'd get nothing made. I make mistakes all the time. So there we are. And like I said, I have the pattern paper on the front of that. So I'm starting out with some American Craft brown cardstock, and I'm just going to assemble this super cute little balloon. You'll see that I'm just using the main base as is. So the strings will remain brown, and the basket at the bottom will remain brown. I'm not adding in any additional layers. Now I'm going to add in some Doodlebug pattern paper. Like I said, I used Flea Market and Pumpkin Spice. So, I like to alter my patterns a little bit, or alternate is what I meant to say. And there we are. So I'm going to have like orange and this fun floral. And I'm just going to alter that. Now, I've been trying to make cards for all the different, reasons using this hot air balloon. I just think it's super cute, fun to use. You can use that pattern paper of yours and, make a really cute hot air balloon. You can add a gnome if you want, or add some of the gnome friends. There's all sorts of animals that can fly in your balloon. So I'm going to do the exact same thing to my second balloon. I'll be using different patterns. There we go. And I'm just going to add in, there's that. So I've got the two little border pieces along that, and then I'm going to add in my pattern. So I'm using that same orange, but I'm going to use a different pattern for my alternate. So I like to start on the edge with these. Once you put on that little band to the hot air balloon, like the bottom piece, you can sort of work in from the edges. Next, I'm going to add, this is my fun pattern. So there we are. And I'm going to add in my orange here now. And I just think these are just so super cute. And like I said, for all different holidays easily. I know I've made a graduation card with it. I've made baby cards with it. And I'm just sort of making my way through all the different types of cards you can make with this adorable set. So there, using my Barely Art glue, weighting it down. I'm going to stick down this cute little leaf border. This is the Build-A-Booth Fall Add-ons. And I used a bunch of solid paper tray ink cardstock for this. Orange Zest, Canyon Clay, Autumn Rose, Spring Moss, and Scarlet Jewel. Everything is always listed in my blog post. So I'm just going to add that on. I also used Doodlebug's Dot Stripe in the 6-inch. Or no, this candy, no, I bet you, I think that was the Candy Stripe and Sprinkles, sorry. Kind of looks the same when I'm looking at this little tiny window that I'm editing. Okay, so for this one, I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm using the Build-A-Booth Fall Add-ons. And for these little pies, I used paper tray ink, Orange Zest, Canyon Clay, Nina Desert Storm, and paper tray ink craft cardstock. And then I'm going to clamp down the little bows there. So next I'm going to put together my little mini gnome, starting with the beard. I'm using American Crafts Darker Brown, and I also ran some Close to My Heart white pigment ink around the edges, just so you can see the, so there's a contrast between the mustache and the beard, right? I'm adding on this fun little hat. Then I'll add the beard, or not the beard, the little mustache next. I kind of like to overlap the hat a little bit. I do weight it down. I'm going to pop up the little nose with a little sliver of dimensional. For my skin tones, I always use P13 Stamping Pad skin tones that you can get over at the Jaded Blossom store. I'm cutting off his little nub feet because we're not going to have feet showing. I'm going to add a strip of ATG tape to the top of that basket, and I'm going to slip him in. And isn't he cute? Oh, he's just too cute, right? I'm adding him to my little hot air balloon. I'm going to pop up his hat just so there's a little bit of dimension, a little air behind his hat, right? Now I'm going to have him holding a piece of pie. So I'm going to pop that up as well, sort of where the hand is going to end up. And I'm going to add my little hand. I'm going to glue that though right on top of the pie. And then I'm going to add the little waving hand just to his beard. There, isn't that cute? So he's waving, holding a piece of pie. There, and then we're going to glue this whole little item down as one piece. I just find this is easier, right? So I'm going to add some glue to the whole thing, and then I will stick it down. Now, all my die cutting today was done with my Anna Griffin Mini Empress and my regular Empress, working on a Stampin' Up! Pad, reverse tweezers, Barely Art glue, ATG tape, all the things I always do. And I do weight it down with an acrylic block. Then I realized, you know what? I'm going to need to pull out my reverse tweezers to hold down some of this stuff so it dries flat. There. So I do have some clouds, and I cut that out of paper tray ink white cardstock. And these are clouds from the rainbow dies, and then the little tiny chubby cloud, that is from the Gnome Dies Weather add-ons. So I have two larger clouds from the rainbow dies, and then one, that chubby cloud, the small one from the Gnome Dies Weather add-ons. So I just love these clouds. They've got that cartoon look. It's fun. I am using, that is foam tape from Simon Says Stamp. It's just a little bit thinner. I wanted to keep things level, so that's why I used it just along the edge where it hung off the hot air balloon. Now, next I'm going to add on another little hot air balloon with some pieces of that same foam tape. I'll say that I like the height of it. I really like the way it sticks, but I will say it's kind of hard to get the backing off it. But I think that that's improved. Mine is an older roll, so, you know, when you buy it now, it's probably not as hard to get off the roll, or off the, like, get the backing tape off. Okay, so there we are, and I'm going to add on that little cloud there. Isn't this cute? And I do clamp it down. Now I've got one more little cloud I'm going to kind of slip in behind my gnome. I will trim off that overhang with a pair of scissors once I get it in place. I'm kind of slipping it in behind. I kind of like the visual triangle of three big clouds. I'm just going to get it in place, like I said, and I will trim off that overhang. There it is. And isn't it cute? Oh my goodness, just adorable. Now next I'm going to use a full-sized gnome. So I start with a little dress. And that's Doodlebug pattern paper again. Same thing for the hat, but I do next add on the little face. That's that P13 stamping pad skin tones. So you kind of want to add it right about there. Then the hat you add on next, and that'll overlap that little face a bit. There we are. And I just want to make sure it's nice and lined up with my base layer. Remember, you can use anything for your base layer. I always use black American Crafts cardstock, but you can use whatever you want because it doesn't show. Now this is American Crafts brown cardstock, these long braids. That's the Gnome Dies hair add-ons, so you can get some different hairdos. I'm going to weight that down with my acrylic block. And I'm going to add on 2 little bows with Doodlebug paper again. Oops, there. I just think that this is so cute, kind of Rapunzel-y, right? And next I'm going to pop up the little nose with a Stampin' Up! Dimensional again. So just a couple little miniature dimensionals, and then I'll pop up that nose. I just think it's so cute. Okay, and again, I'm going to cut off the little feet nubs because I'm not putting feet on these guys. It's going to be tucked into the little hot air balloon basket. So I'm just trimming that off with my scissors. And there we go. Now we have this little gnome ready to pop in this little basket. So you see, you can use the large gnomes or the small gnomes in these little hot air balloons. I'm going to add a little bit of ATG tape behind the basket, and then I'm going to slip my little girl in, kind of have her tilted to the side. I'm going to add a couple of little Stampin' Up! Dimensionals behind her hat. There we are. Whoops. Don't want that peeking out. And isn't that cute? I'm going to add a couple little pieces behind her head as well. And I'll have to do some finagling with the reverse tweezers. That's the nice thing about reverse tweezers. Now I'm going to add a little bit of glue behind the braids just so she sticks. They're kind of anchored onto that basket a little bit better. It makes it easier for me to stick down this whole thing as a unit to my card front. Just going to clamp that down. That's why reverse tweezers are awesome. And now I am figuring out where these little clouds are going to end up before I stick her down. So I've got a visual triangle of clouds. There. And I will add my cute little girl down onto my card base. I'm using my Bearly Art glue again. Remember, you can use whatever glue you like. Right? They're all pretty similar out there. All of the ones that are, you know, safe for paper kind of archiving, right? All the scrapbooking and card making glues are very similar in formulation. So it's just whatever you like. So I am going to use my reverse tweezers just to stick this, hold this thing down in place so it can dry. I like to keep things flat while they dry. It kind of prevents warping, right? And there we are. And like I said, a lot of reverse tweezers are always handy. Next, I'm going to add on my last 2 clouds. So that's also from the rainbow dies. Like I said, they're my favorite clouds. Paper tray ink white cardstock. I know I'm a little crazy about that, but that's what I like. Next, I'm going to add in this last little cloud. Oops, there's a little bit of hangers on, so I use a nail sponge or a nail sanding sponge to get, to kind of get them off. And I'm using some Stampin' Up! Dimensionals for this cloud. Just where it kind of hangs off that little basket. And there we go. Getting it into place. I just think it is too cute, right? Isn't that sweet? I'm going to trim off that overhang with a pair of scissors. Now I've got a couple of little hands here. I'm going to pop them up with my Stampin' Up! Dimensionals, the little miniature ones. So she's got two hands. And I'm going to slip a couple of these leaves. These leaves are from Jaded Blossom's Fall Dies. And I cut them out of paper tray and cardstock in, I think it's Autumn Rose is one of them. And hold on a second, I've got to see the other one. The other one is, I think that's Canyon Clay. So like a darker orange. So I'm just going to slip them in her hand like she's holding a couple of leaves. So my mini gnome is holding a piece of pie. This one is holding some leaves. But, there we go. That's what it looks like so far. So I'm going to do some stamp surgery. This stamp is from the stamp set, The Sky is the Limit. So you just want to use sharp scissors and be very careful to cut between the stamp lines, right? And I show you this because you can always stick them back together and stamp them as a unit. But if you're going to use them more the other way, then do it, right? Nothing's stopping you from doing it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I am going to stamp onto paper tray ink white cardstock. And I'm going to use my Misty and some VersaFine Clara Nocturne ink again. Just to stamp it. And then we will figure out how it's going to fit on my card front. So it's going to say flying by to say, and then on the inside it says Happy Thanksgiving. Right? So there it is. And I'm going to stamp it one more time. I'm just making sure the other edge is flat so I can line it up on my Misty. And we'll stamp it again. There we are. And then remember, this can smear. You got to let it dry a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to stamp the sentiment or cut the sentiment out with the outline die. And then I'm going to freehand cut the bottom of the stamp. It's not as good as the top, but it works. It's fine. Right? I was trying to save myself some work by having to cut out the whole thing. But then I end up changing my mind in a little bit here. Like I said, I always leave stuff in my videos because, people should see how I come to my decisions, right? So there is my sentiment, flying by to say. And I realize it's too long. Now, had I been thinking, I would have cut the stamps apart and stamped them on the clouds. That would have worked. But I didn't think of that at the time. So I ended up cutting them apart. And I'm just going to pop them up on the different clouds. So on this one, each word has, is cut out separately. And I just pop them up with Stampin' Up! Dimensionals. Now this works. On my other card, I do it a little bit differently, but I think both work really well. Now, had I planned this from the beginning, I would have stamped the sentiments on the clouds and called it done, right? But, we learn these things after sometimes, right? So I'm going to pop up my next little sentiment. So it'll say, flying by to say. So I'm adding, like I said, those couple more little Stampin' Up! Dimensionals, and then I'll pop that up on the cloud as well. And I actually don't mind it. I probably would have rather had stamped it on the cloud, but it works. So I am pulling out a Sakura black glaze pen, and I just do a ... right? So for this one, I decided to keep the flying by in one piece. And I'm going to stamp that up. So it'll be flying by to say, instead of all the words separate, right? So I am just peeling off the backings here, and then I'll get them in place. You'll notice there's a boo-boo on the back of my stamped sentiment, but that's okay. No one knows but you and me, right? You can flip over your paper, use the other side. Whoops. And now we will get these in place. I just need to grab my reverse tweezers to help me out. Kind of helps keep my fingers out of the way, right? And there we go. So I'm going to pick them up. So it says flying by. And this will say to say. And then I'm going to do the same thing, add 3 little dots, dot, dot, dot. That's that black glaze pen. Remember, you got to let it dry. It'll smear. But otherwise, it adds some nice dimension and shine. So there it is. Now I'm pulling out, these are heart, like shape sprinkles from Doodlebug, and they are just hearts. But I have no idea what they're called because they're off the backing. So they're just hearts from Doodlebug. You know, you can use them from all different paper, all the different, you know, lines from Doodlebug. They all kind of match, like all the colors go together. So I'm adding in orange hearts on both of these. And I just think that these turned out super cute. Obviously odd numbers, right, is your friend for these. Visual triangles, like I always say. And there it is. Isn't that cute? I just think she's adorable. I'm going to do the exact same thing on this one. So visual triangles, odd numbers, right? And I think the hearts really add something to it. Looks super cute, right? Just going to add 2 more there. Isn't that fun? I just think it's the sweetest. I'm going to add 2 more in this upper cloud, and then we will call it done. So thank you so much for stopping by. Be sure to hop on over to the Jaded Blossom blog, be inspired by the team, the Jaded Blossom store to get your hands on these amazing products. And thanks as always for watching my videos. I really appreciate it. You know, make sure to come back and watch some more. Bye, everybody.